Hi, I'm Matt Chenard, Senior Waterfowl Programs Manager for Delta Waterfowl, here with our June conditions report. Well, the big news here around Bismarck, of course, has been the Missouri River. The water levels are really high, and that's been a result of big rains across the upper Midwest. In Montana, they've had some big rains. Here in North Dakota, we've had some big spotty thunderstorms and rains. And as a result, the conditions are, of course, along the river, the water levels are really high. But out on the prairies where those thunderstorms have hit, conditions are probably a little bit better than they were a couple months ago. The North Dakota Game and Fish just came out with their May waterfowl count, and the good news on that was that duck populations were very similar to what they were at this time last year. The bad news is that the wetland counts were down about 30%. So that's a little disappointing, but in the grand scheme of things, the duck numbers are still high, and all of these rains that we've had should make the nesting effort pretty strong this year. And so we're pretty confident that we'll have a relatively good fall flight from this part of the prairies. South Dakota's much in the same boat. You know, they've had lots of thunderstorms, western Minnesota as well. So things are, of course, a lot better there than they were at this time last year. For a report from Prairie Canada, let's hear from Jim Fisher.
Greetings from the Delta Marsh. We're here with our friend sago pondweed, which the canvasbacks love in the come fall. The conditions here on the Delta Marsh are where the water levels are down quite a bit, and that's kind of the same as the rest of the prairies compared to the past several years, which we've had good water levels. This year is kind of a mixed bag, kind of more returning to normal conditions throughout the prairies. Alberta is interesting in that the southern part of the province is quite wet. East of Edmonton is quite wet, and in between we've had a lot of water dropping out. We've got an area where we have a bunch of hen houses that the water's dropped right out of those semi-permanent wetlands. And but luckily on the upside is those hen houses already hatched off their mallard clutches. And then in Saskatchewan we've had areas with extreme amounts of rainfall, up to 10 or 12 inches reported in some areas around Estevan and other places. So it's a real mixed bag there. Some areas I would say are below average. The seasonal wetlands mostly dry now. The same as it can be said for Manitoba, where the seasonal wetlands are largely dry at this time of year. The semi-permanent wetlands are still holding good amounts of water. So on average, I would say throughout Prairie Canada, an average year. Further east in Ontario, around Quebec and Ontario, around the Great Lakes, conditions are above average, so doing quite well there, and hatches are well on their way. And then you get into the maritime provinces and it continues to be wet there. And ironically in Newfoundland, we're not sure we're out of winter, even though officially we're into summer now. They're still experiencing some snowfalls. That's a wrap on Prairie Canada and the rest of the country.
Thanks, Jim. Well, elsewhere in the U.S. and in the breeding grounds for ducks in the Northeast, of course, they've had lots of heavy rains there as well. The reports we're hearing from there is that there was good production for goslings and ducks, and there's plenty of good habitat there for those broods going forward in the summer here. Should be a good flight for the hunters in the Atlantic Flyway. Out west, it's gotten hotter and of course drier out there. It's pretty much summer out there right now. And so the nesting effort, of course, is winding down, but it looked like it was a pretty good spring out for the folks in the Pacific Flyway. Overall, we think the habitat conditions are in pretty decent shape this year. Hopefully that'll work out to a good flight for hunters this fall. As always, thanks for your support for Delta Waterfowl, and I hope you enjoyed this habitat conditions report.